My name is Phoenix Blackwood, and at 28, I thought I knew what family betrayal looked like. I was wrong. Standing in my childhood kitchen last Christmas, watching my sister Celeste accept congratulations for her successful tech startup, the same company ID built, from nothing I realized blood doesn't guarantee loyalty. My parents beamed with pride, completely unaware their golden child had stolen everything from their disappointment daughter. That moment shattered 15 years of gaslighting. But it also ignited something dangerous: my need for justice. Hey everyone! Before we dive into this wild family revenge story, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. If you've ever dealt with family drama or workplace betrayal, you're going to want to stick around for this one. Hit that like button if you're ready for some serious karma, and don't forget to subscribe because trust me, you won't believe how this ends. Let's get into how my own sister tried to destroy me, and how I made sure justice was served. The story begins 3 years earlier, when I was 25 and drowning in my parents' disappointment. While Celeste sailed through law school with their endless financial support and praise, I'd been the black sheep, the creative one who couldn't stick to anything practical. After dropping out of my MBA program to pursue what my father called another one of Phoenix phases, I'd been essentially disowned emotionally, if not financially. That's when I discovered my passion for sustainable technology. Working from my tiny studio apartment, surviving on ramen and determination, I spent 18 months developing an app called EcoLink. It connected environmentally conscious consumers with local sustainable businesses, using an algorithm I'd taught myself to code during countless sleepless nights. The app wasn't just innovative, it was personal. I'd watched our family's small hometown get destroyed by corporate chains, and I wanted to give small businesses a fighting chance. My breakthrough came when EcoLink caught the attention of Green Tech Innovations, a mid-sized venture capital firm specializing in environmental startups. They loved my prototype, my passion, and most importantly, my business plan. But there was a catch: they wanted to see more professional presentation materials and legal documentation before committing to their initial $500,000 investment round. That's when I made my first mistake. Despite years of my family treating me like a failure, I still craved their approval. When I mentioned needing help with legal documents, my parents immediately suggested Celeste, who had just finished her law degree and was working at a prestigious corporate firm. Finally, something where your sister can help you succeed, my mother said, as if my previous achievements had been invisible. Celeste agreed to help, but with her characteristic condescension. "Oh, Phoenix, this is so cute," Shed said, flipping through my business plan during our first meeting. "A little environmental app, very on brand for you." She charged me her firm's standard rate money I couldn't afford, but borrowed anyway, and promised to have everything ready for my investor meeting. During the 6 weeks Celeste worked on my legal documents, she asked detailed questions about every aspect of my business. She wanted to understand my coding process, my market research, my financial projections, even my future expansion plans. I thought she was being thorough. I was grateful someone in my family was finally taking my work seriously. The warning signs were there, but I missed them. Celeste started working late more frequently, claiming she was swamped with corporate cases. Shed asked to borrow my laptop to review the technical specifications more thoroughly. She requested copies of my source code for intellectual property protection purposes. When I hesitated about the source code, she laughed. "Phoenix, I'm your sister. I'm trying to protect your interests here." 2 days before my scheduled presentation to Green Tech Innovations, Celeste called with devastating news. "I'm so sorry, Phoenix, but I found some issues with your intellectual property claims. It turns out some of your core algorithms are too similar to existing patents. The investors could face legal problems if they fund this." I was devastated. Months of work, my entire savings account, and my one shot at proving myself to both my family and the business world, all apparently worthless because of patent conflicts I'd never heard of. Celeste was sympathetic but firm. "Maybe this is for the best," she said gently. "You can go back to school, find something more stable. Not everyone is cut out for entrepreneurship." That night, I called Green Tech Innovations to cancel our meeting. The disappointment in their voice was crushing. "We were really excited about EcoLink," the lead investor said. "If you ever resolve these patent issues, please don't hesitate to reach out again." For 6 months, I spiraled. I moved back in with my parents, took a soul-crushing retail job, and tried to forget about my entrepreneurial dreams. My family was relieved I'd come to my senses. Celeste got promoted at her law firm. Life returned to its familiar pattern of me being the disappointment and her being the golden child. Then came the family dinner that changed everything. It was a Sunday in October, and Celeste arrived an hour late, practically glowing with excitement. "I have incredible news," she announced, before she'd even taken off her coat. "I'm leaving the law firm. I'm starting my own company." My father nearly dropped his wine glass. "Your own company? Doing what?" Celeste's smile was radiant. "Sustainable technology. I've developed this amazing app that connects environmentally conscious consumers with local green businesses. It's called EcoConnect, and I've just secured $500,000 in venture capital funding from Green Tech Innovations." The room went silent except for the sound of my heart hammering against my ribs. EcoConnect. Green Tech Innovations. The same investors who'd been excited about my app just months earlier. That's wonderful, sweetheart," my mother managed, though she looked confused. "But when did you develop an interest in environmental technology?" Celeste launched into an explanation that made my blood freeze. She described her algorithm, her market research, her business model. Every word was mine. Every innovation it'd spent 18 months developing. Every late night it'd sacrificed. Every dream it'd poured into that app. She was claiming it all as her own brilliant creation. My parents were mesmerized. Finally, their lawyer daughter was combining her practical skills with entrepreneurial vision. They'd never looked at me with such pride. "Phoenix, isn't this exciting?" my father asked, turning to me with genuine enthusiasm for the first time in years. "Maybe Celeste can give you some advice about business." I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. I excused myself to the bathroom and locked the door, staring at my reflection in the mirror. My sister hadn't just stolen my idea, she'd stolen my entire future, my relationship with my parents, and my sense of self-worth. She'd used my trust, my desperate need for family support, to systematically destroy everything I'd built. But as I stood there, something shifted inside me. The crushing disappointment began transforming into something sharper, more focused. Celeste thought she'd won, but she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated me. Again. I returned to dinner, smiled, and congratulated my sister on her brilliant success. But inside, I was already planning. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. The emotional devastation had crystallized into cold, calculated purpose. Celeste had played a masterful game, but she'd revealed her strategy too early. More importantly, she'd made several critical errors that I could exploit. My first move was research. I spent the entire day at the public library, using their computers to investigate everything about Celeste's new venture. What I discovered was both infuriating and encouraging. She'd filed for EcoConnect's patents just 3 weeks after telling me about my own patent conflicts. The timing was too convenient to be coincidental, and potentially suspicious enough to raise legal questions. More interesting was the technical documentation she'd submitted with her patent applications. Having written the original code myself, I could see where she'd made changes to disguise the theft. But the core architecture, the innovative algorithms that made the app special, those were unmistakably mine. She'd essentially taken my blueprint and changed the decorative elements, while keeping the foundation identical. I also discovered that Green Tech Innovations had been trying to contact me for weeks. Apparently, they'd heard about EcoConnect and wanted to discuss the similarities they'd noticed to my original EcoLink presentation. Celeste had somehow intercepted their communications, probably through the shared email address I'd foolishly given her access to during our collaboration. Armed with this information, I began documenting everything. I gathered my original code repositories, complete with timestamps showing months of development before Celeste's involvement. I found my early sketches and business plans, all dated and photographed with metadata intact. Most crucially, I located my original communications with Green Tech Innovations, proving they'd been interested in my concept long before Celeste's breakthrough. But evidence alone wouldn't be enough. I needed strategy. That's when I remembered Marcus Chen, a former classmate from my MBA program who'd gone into intellectual property law. We'd maintained a casual friendship, and more importantly, had always been impressed by my business instincts despite my academic struggles. When I called him, his response was immediate and reassuring. "Phoenix, what you're describing sounds like textbook intellectual property theft," he said after I'd explained the situation. "But family disputes make these cases complicated. Well, need to be absolutely certain of our facts before we make any moves." Marcus agreed to represent me on contingency payment only if we won. More importantly, he introduced me to Sarah Kim, a private investigator who specialized in corporate fraud cases. Sarah's approach was methodical and ruthless. Family members who steal business ideas usually get sloppy, she explained. They assume emotional manipulation will protect them better than careful planning. Sarah was right. Within 2 weeks, Shed uncovered a trail of evidence that even I hadn't anticipated. Celeste had used her position at her law firm to access patent databases and conduct research on my behalf. Research that Shed then used to identify and avoid actual patent conflicts, while creating fake ones to discourage me. Shed also used firm resources to develop her business plan, essentially having her corporate employer unknowingly subsidize her theft. Even more damaging, Sarah discovered that Celeste had actively interfered with my investor communications. Shed used her legal knowledge to craft emails that appeared to come from me, withdrawing my application for funding and apologizing for fundamental flaws in my business model. Green Tech Innovations had assumed I'd discovered problems with my own concept and gracefully withdrawn. But Sarah's most valuable discovery was personal. Celeste had been documenting her theft. In her private digital files, Sarah found emails to her boyfriend detailing exactly how she was repurposing Phoenix's naive little project into something actually profitable. The emails were cruel, mocking, and legally devastating. "She actually thinks I'm helping her," one message read. "It's almost sad how desperate she is for family approval. She'll never figure out what really happened." Reading those emails was like being punched in the stomach, but they also eliminated any lingering guilt I felt about my planned revenge. Celeste hadn't just stolen my business, Shed enjoyed humiliating me. Shed found my vulnerability, my desperate need for family acceptance, and weaponized it against me. With Marcus' help, I developed a 3-phase strategy. Phase 1, gather irrefutable evidence. Phase 2, position myself advantageously before revealing my knowledge. Phase 3, systematically destroy her theft while reclaiming what was mine. Phase 1 was already complete. For Phase 2, I needed to insert myself into Celeste's business world, without raising suspicion. That's when I remembered her weakness: ego. Celeste loved being seen as a mentor, especially to family members she considered beneath her. I could use that. I started attending her networking events, playing the role of the impressed younger sister seeking guidance. Celeste was delighted. Finally, she had an audience for her business wisdom. Someone who would appreciate her natural entrepreneurial instincts without knowing enough to ask dangerous questions. During these conversations, I gathered more evidence. Celeste would casually mention challenges she was facing with her algorithm, describing problems that I recognized from my own development process. Shed asked seemingly innocent questions about my old coding work, fishing for solutions to technical issues she didn't understand. Each conversation gave me more insight into her knowledge gaps and operational vulnerabilities. More importantly, I learned about her relationship with Green Tech Innovations. The investors were pleased but not entirely confident. They'd noticed that Celeste's technical explanations sometimes seemed shallow, and they were concerned about her lack of coding background. They'd hinted about bringing in a technical co-founder, someone who could handle the development side while Celeste managed business operations. That's when I realized how to implement Phase 3. I didn't just need to expose Celeste's theft, I needed to position myself as the obvious solution to her technical deficiencies. If I played this correctly, I could reclaim my stolen concept and use GreenTech's own investment to fund my revenge. The plan was ambitious, risky, and required perfect timing. But as I sat in my childhood bedroom, surrounded by evidence of my sister's betrayal, I felt ready. Celeste had taught me that family loyalty was a weakness to be exploited. Now I would teach her that underestimating family was a mistake that could destroy everything. I had been Phoenix, the disappointment, for too long. It was time to rise from the ashes of my sister's betrayal and show her what a real entrepreneur could accomplish when motivated by justice instead of theft. My opportunity came sooner than expected. 3 weeks into my undercover mentorship with Celeste, she received troubling news from Green Tech Innovations. Their technical review team had identified several critical flaws in EcoConnect's algorithm that could cause scaling problems as the user base grew. They needed these issues resolved before releasing the second round of funding. Celeste was panicking, and for good reason. The problems that identified were the same ones I'd wrestled with during my original development. I'd eventually solved them, but the solutions required deep understanding of the underlying code architecture, understanding that Celeste obviously lacked. "I don't know what to do, Phoenix," she confessed during one of our coffee meetings, her usual confidence replaced by genuine fear. "They're talking about bringing in an outside technical consultant, but that could expose inconsistencies in my development timeline. I almost laughed at her euphemism. Instead, I played my role perfectly. Have you considered bringing me in as a consultant? I mean, I know I'm not as successful as you, but I did do some coding work on my old project. Maybe I could help with the technical details while you handle the business side. Celeste's relief was immediate and transparent. Phoenix, that's brilliant. You understand enough to help, but not enough to overshadow the project. And having family involved keeps everything confidential. Her casual cruelty was breathtaking, but it also confirmed that my strategy was working. She truly saw me as too incompetent to threaten her, which made me the perfect Trojan horse. Within days, I was officially consulting for EcoConnect, with full access to their code repositories, investor communications, and strategic planning documents. Celeste introduced me to the green tech team as her technical specialist sister, who's been helping with development from the beginning. The irony was lost on everyone except me. Working inside EcoConnect gave me unprecedented access to document Celeste's theft. Every day revealed new evidence, code comments ID written that Shed forgotten to change, variable names that matched my original system, architectural decisions that only made sense in the context of my initial design philosophy. I documented everything, while simultaneously appearing to help solve their technical problems. But more importantly, I began building relationships with the key players who would ultimately decide EcoConnect's fate. The Green Tech Innovations team was led by David Martinez, a veteran investor who'd built his reputation on identifying authentic innovation. His technical advisor was Dr. Rebecca Walsh, a computer science professor whose specialty was algorithm development and optimization. Both David and Rebecca were impressed by my technical knowledge, but I could sense their confusion about the disconnect between my obvious expertise and Celeste's claimed role as the primary developer. During our meetings, I would casually reference design decisions and technical challenges in ways that revealed my intimate familiarity with the system's development. It's interesting how you remember specific details about the development process, Rebecca mentioned after one particularly technical discussion. Your sister seems to have a more business-focused recollection of the same events. I began carefully planting seeds of doubt. Not accusations, those would come later, but gentle inconsistencies that made thoughtful observers question the official narrative. When Celeste couldn't explain why certain technical decisions had been made, I would step in with detailed explanations that revealed the depth of my involvement. When she made statements about the development timeline that contradicted documented evidence, I would reference my consulting notes that told a different story. Meanwhile, I was building my case with Marcus and Sarah. The private investigator had uncovered financial records, showing that Celeste had been billing her law firm for research time that was actually spent developing her stolen business plan. More damaging, Shed found communications between Celeste and several patent attorneys, discussing strategies for defending intellectual property claims from family members with potential competing interests. Sarah had also been investigating green tech innovations themselves, and what she discovered was fascinating. The firm had a strict policy against funding projects with questionable intellectual property provenance, having been burned by similar situations in the past. David Martinez personally reviewed all patent documentation and development timelines, specifically looking for red flags that might indicate stolen concepts. If we present this evidence correctly, Marcus explained during one of our strategy sessions, Green Tech will essentially investigate Celeste themselves. They have more resources than we do, and their financial stake gives them strong motivation to uncover the truth. But I realized that evidence alone wouldn't be enough. I needed Celeste to expose herself, to make mistakes under pressure that would confirm what the documentation already suggested. That's when I decided to escalate the technical challenges facing EcoConnect. Using my insider access, I began identifying and reporting additional algorithmic flaws that Celeste couldn't possibly understand or solve. These weren't fabricated problems, they were real issues that I'd anticipated and already solved in my original development. But by revealing them gradually, I created mounting pressure that forced Celeste to rely increasingly on my technical expertise. Each time she turned to me for help, I would provide solutions while carefully documenting her ignorance of the underlying principles. The pattern became increasingly obvious to anyone paying attention. I understood this system's architecture better than its supposed creator. The turning point came during a critical meeting with the Green Tech Technical Review Committee. Celeste had been asked to present detailed explanations of EcoConnect's core innovations, the specific breakthroughs that justified their investment. Shed prepared extensively, but her presentation was clearly rehearsed rather than born from genuine understanding. Dr. Rebecca Walsh began asking probing questions about the algorithm's mathematical foundations. Celeste stumbled through superficial answers that revealed she didn't truly comprehend her own supposed innovations. Finally, Rebecca turned to me. Phoenix, as the technical consultant, can you explain the reasoning behind the Bayesian optimization approach in the recommendation engine? This was the trap I'd been waiting for. The Bayesian optimization approach was something I'd developed myself, a novel solution to a complex problem that had taken weeks to perfect. Celeste had never even seen the original research that inspired it. I provided a detailed, passionate explanation that demonstrated not just technical knowledge, but genuine creative ownership. I discussed the iterative development process, the failed approaches Id abandoned, the breakthrough moment when Id realized how to solve the scalability problems. It was the kind of explanation that could only come from someone who had lived through every challenge and triumph of the development process. The room was silent when I finished. David Martinez and Rebecca Walsh exchanged meaningful glances. Even Celeste looked uncomfortable, though she was probably just confused by the technical details. That was very illuminating, Rebecca said carefully. It sounds like you've been deeply involved in this project's development from the very beginning. After the meeting, David requested a private conversation with both Celeste and me. I'd like to schedule separate technical interviews with each of you next week, he said. We want to ensure we fully understand the development process and the respective contributions of all team members. Celeste agreed enthusiastically, clearly not understanding the trap Shed just walked into. But I could see the beginning of doubt in David's eyes. The technical interview would be her undoing and my vindication. As we left the Green Tech offices, I felt the familiar sensation of pieces clicking into place. Celeste had built her theft on a foundation of deception and family manipulation. But Shed never considered that her victim might be smarter, more determined, and better prepared than Shed assumed. The stage was set for her complete destruction. The technical interviews were scheduled for the following Thursday. I spent the week meticulously preparing, but not in the way Celeste assumed. While she crammed technical concepts Shed never truly understood, I was coordinating the final phase of my revenge with Marcus and Sarah. We need to time this perfectly, Marcus advised. Once Green Tech discovers the theft, they'll move quickly to protect their investment. We want to be ready with our lawsuit and evidence package the moment they confront Celeste. Sarah had uncovered the final piece of damning evidence. Security footage from Celeste's law firm showing her accessing my files after hours, combined with digital forensics proving Shed copied my source code to her personal devices. The timeline was irrefutable. Shed stolen everything during our supposed collaboration. The morning of the interviews, I arrived at Green Tech's offices carrying a flash drive containing my complete original development files, time-stamped communications with early beta testers, and video recordings of my initial prototype demonstrations. Everything Celeste claimed to have created, I could prove Ed developed months before our collaboration began. Celeste went first, which was perfect. I watched through the conference room's glass walls as she attempted to explain technical concepts Shed memorized but never internalized. Dr. Walsh's questions became increasingly specific, probing the kind of implementation details that only the original developer would know instinctively. Can you walk us through your decision-making process for the database schema optimization? Rebecca asked. Specifically, why you chose denormalization for the user preference tables. Celeste's answer was textbook perfect but completely wrong for the actual implementation. Shed clearly researched standard approaches, but didn't understand why id made different choices based on our specific user behavior patterns. Her explanation would have worked for a generic app, but not for the unique challenges EcoConnect actually faced. When my turn came, I didn't just answer their technical questions, I told the story of my development journey. I explained the late nights spent debugging the recommendation algorithm, the breakthrough moment when Ed realized how to solve the scalability bottleneck, the iterative testing process that led to our current user interface design. This is fascinating, David said, leaning forward. You're describing development work that would have taken months, but according to our timeline, EcoConnect was conceptualized and developed in just 6 weeks. Actually, I said, reaching for my flash drive, the development took much longer than that. May I show you something? I presented my evidence methodically. Original code repositories showing 18 months of development work, communications with beta testers from 8 months before Celeste's supposed breakthrough, video demonstrations of my EcoLink prototype that was functionally identical to EcoConnect. The room grew deadly quiet as the implications became clear. David and Rebecca examined my documentation with the intensity of forensic investigators. Every timestamp, Every communication, every piece of code told the same story. I was EcoConnect's true creator. Phoenix. Rebecca said finally, "Are you alleging that your sister stole your intellectual property?" "I'm not alleging anything," I replied calmly. "I'm providing evidence and letting you draw your own conclusions." David's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then looked at me with surprise. "I just received an email from our legal department. Apparently, they've been contacted by your attorney regarding intellectual property claims against EcoConnect. The timing of this interview is quite interesting." That was Marcus Q. Right on schedule, he would be presenting our formal legal case to GreenTech's legal team, complete with all the evidence Sarah had gathered. The coordination was intentional. I wanted Celeste's technical failures and my legal claims to hit simultaneously, creating maximum impact. 20 minutes later, David's assistant knocked on the conference room door. "Mr. Martinez? Legal needs to see you immediately. They say it's urgent regarding the EcoConnect project." David and Rebecca exchanged grim looks. "Phoenix, would you mind waiting here? We may have more questions." I sat alone in the conference room, watching through the glass as chaos erupted in the GreenTech offices. I could see David in heated conversation with the legal team, Rebecca examining documents with increasing alarm, and assistants rushing between offices carrying thick folders. Then I saw Celeste. She emerged from the elevator looking confident and satisfied, clearly believing her interview had gone well. But as she approached the reception area, David intercepted her. Even through the soundproof glass, I could see her expression change from confidence to confusion to mounting horror as he spoke. She kept shaking her head, gesturing emphatically, but David's body language was unmistakable. The conversation was not going in her favor. When he handed her a folder probably containing copies of my evidence, her face went completely pale. Celeste turned and looked directly at me through the conference room window. For the first time in our lives, I saw genuine fear in her eyes. Shed finally realized that her disappointing little sister had outmaneuvered her completely. What happened next was even more satisfying than it imagined. Celeste tried to storm into the conference room, probably planning to confront me or attempt some desperate damage control, but building security stopped her. David had already instructed them to restrict her access pending legal review. Through the glass, I watched my sister completely lose composure. She was screaming, gesturing wildly, demanding to speak with me. The professional mask Shed worn her entire life was finally slipping, revealing the entitled, manipulative person underneath. David returned to the conference room looking exhausted. "Phoenix, I think we need to have a very different conversation about EcoConnect's future. I understand you need to protect your investment," I said. "I'm prepared to discuss licensing arrangements or partnership structures that would allow the project to continue while properly recognizing intellectual property rights." Rebecca joined us, carrying a thick, legal folder. "Our preliminary review suggests your claims have substantial merit. We're particularly concerned about the implications for our due diligence process. If we've unknowingly funded a stolen concept, you've funded a good concept," I interrupted. "The question is whether you want to continue working with someone who stole it, or partner with the person who actually created it." David smiled for the first time since the interviews began. "Phoenix, I think we should discuss your vision for EcoConnect's future. Clearly, you understand this project better than anyone." As we began negotiating my return to my own stolen company, I could still see Celeste in the lobby, now on her phone with what was probably her lawyer. Shed spent years teaching me that family loyalty was weakness. Now she was learning that underestimating family was a fatal mistake. The next 72 hours were a whirlwind of legal maneuvering, corporate restructuring, and family destruction that exceeded even my most optimistic revenge fantasies. GreenTech Innovations moved with the efficiency of a company that had been burned by intellectual property theft before, and their response was swift and merciless. By Friday morning, Celeste had been formally notified that her funding agreement was suspended pending legal investigation. GreenTech's legal team, now armed with Sarah's evidence and my documentation, had uncovered additional concerning details about Celeste's patent applications and business registration documents. Several contained information that could only have come from my original development work, creating a paper trail of theft that would be impossible to explain away. Marcus called me with updates throughout the weekend. "Celeste's lawyer is in damage control mode," he reported. "They're trying to negotiate some kind of settlement that would avoid criminal charges, but GreenTech isn't interested. They want this resolved quickly and definitively." The most satisfying development came Sunday evening. Celeste's law firm, having discovered that Shed used company resources to research and develop her stolen business plan, launched their own internal investigation. The partnership Shed worked so hard to achieve was now in serious jeopardy, and her legal career was hanging by a thread. But the professional consequences were nothing compared to what was happening in our family. My parents had remained blissfully unaware of the legal drama until Celeste showed up at their house Sunday night, desperate for support and probably hoping for financial help with her mounting legal bills. What she got instead was a conversation that shattered 3 decades of family dynamics. I know this because my father called me Monday morning, his voice shaking with a combination of rage and disbelief. "Phoenix, I need you to explain something to me. Celeste is claiming that you've somehow stolen her business idea and convinced her investors that you created it. But she can't explain how you managed to create 18 months of development records before she even started her company." The conversation that followed was one of the most surreal of my life. For the first time, I watched my parents grapple with evidence that their golden child was not just flawed, but genuinely malicious. I walked them through the timeline methodically. My original development work, Celeste's supposed legal help, her theft of my intellectual property, and her systematic betrayal of my trust. "You're telling me that Celeste deliberately sabotaged your business, stole your idea, and then convinced us to praise her for her success?" My mother asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm not telling you anything, Mom. I'm showing you documented evidence and letting you reach your own conclusions." The silence on the phone was deafening. Then my father spoke, and his voice contained a coldness I'd never heard before. "Phoenix, we owe you an apology that we can probably never adequately express. We failed you as parents, and we enabled Celeste to become someone we don't recognize." That afternoon, my parents drove to my apartment the first time they'd visited me in over 2 years. They sat in my tiny living room, surrounded by the evidence boards and legal documents it assembled during my investigation, and truly saw their daughters clearly for the first time. My mother cried when she read Sarah's discovery of Celeste's mocking emails about my desperation for family approval. My father stared at the timeline charts that proved how systematically Celeste had planned her theft. But what affected them most was seeing my original development work, the passion projects, the innovative solutions, the months of unpaid labor that had produced something genuinely valuable. "We convinced ourselves that your business ideas were just phases," my father admitted. "We thought we were protecting you from disappointment by encouraging more practical choices. Instead, we were protecting ourselves from admitting that you'd found success in a way we didn't understand." The conversation lasted 6 hours. We discussed not just Celeste's theft, but years of family dynamics that had enabled it. My parents began recognizing how their favoritism had created a monster, and how their dismissal of my achievements had made me vulnerable to exploitation. Meanwhile, Celeste's world was collapsing in real time. Her law firm placed her on administrative leave pending their internal investigation. Green Tech formally terminated her funding agreement and demanded return of all invested capital money Shed already spent on office space, equipment, and personnel. Her business partners, who joined EcoConnect based on her representation that she was the original developer, were threatening their own legal action for fraudulent inducement. Most devastating of all, the tech industry was a surprisingly small world. Word of her intellectual property theft spread quickly through professional networks, effectively blacklisting her from future venture capital opportunities. Her reputation, which Shed valued above everything else, was destroyed. But Celeste's response to her collapsing world revealed just how toxic Shed become. Instead of accepting responsibility or showing remorse, she doubled down on manipulation and blame. She accused me of orchestrating an elaborate conspiracy to destroy her career out of jealousy. She claimed my evidence was fabricated, and my legal case was harassment. She even suggested that my parents were being manipulated by my vindictive lies. The final break came when she attempted to rally extended family members to her cause, spreading stories about my betrayal and demanding they choose sides. This backfired spectacularly when my cousin Derek, a software engineer, asked to see her technical documentation. Within hours, had confirmed what I'd been saying. The code architecture was clearly my work, and Celeste's explanations made no technical sense. By Wednesday, even Celeste's boyfriend had distanced himself from the situation. The same man who'd received her mocking emails about me was now refusing to return her calls, apparently unwilling to associate with someone facing multiple legal investigations. That evening, Marcus called with news that felt like the final nail in Celeste's coffin. "Green Tech wants to offer you a revised funding agreement," he said. "They're prepared to provide the full $500,000, plus an additional $300,000 for the delays and complications. They want you as the sole founder and CEO of what they're now calling EcoLink, your original name. As I hung up the phone, I realized that my revenge was complete. Celeste had lost her career, her reputation, her family support, and her future prospects. Shed gained nothing from her theft except a brief taste of success built on lies, and now she was facing the consequences of her choices. But more importantly, I'd reclaimed not just my intellectual property, but my sense of self-worth and my relationship with my parents. The disappointment daughter had become the family success story, while the golden child had revealed herself to be fool's gold. 6 months later, I was sitting in my new corner office overlooking downtown, reviewing quarterly reports that showed EcoLink had exceeded all growth projections. The app that Celeste had dismissed as cute and naive was now processing over 50,000 transactions monthly and had expanded to 12 major cities. GreenTech Innovations had been true to their word. Not only had they provided the revised funding package, but David Martinez had become a genuine mentor, introducing me to a network of entrepreneurs and investors who treated my ideas with respect and excitement. Dr. Rebecca Walsh joined EcoLink's advisory board, helping me navigate technical challenges that had seemed insurmountable just months earlier. The success was gratifying, but what meant more was how the experience had transformed my relationship with my family. My parents had spent the past 6 months working to rebuild trust. They'd spent years eroding. They attended every investor meeting I'd allow them to, asked thoughtful questions about my business strategies, and most importantly, never again dismissed my professional ambitions as phases. We're learning to be proud of the daughter we actually have instead of trying to reshape you into someone else. My mother had said during one of our weekly dinners, a new tradition we'd established. It took us too long to realize that your unconventional path was leading somewhere remarkable. My father had been even more direct. I spent years treating your entrepreneurial spirit like a character flaw that needed correction. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. You've achieved something genuinely impressive, and you did it despite our lack of support, not because of it. As for Celeste, the consequences had been as comprehensive as I'd hoped. Her law firm had terminated her employment after concluding that her misuse of company resources constituted professional misconduct. The State Bar Association had launched their own investigation into her ethical violations, potentially threatening her license to practice law entirely. More personally devastating, she'd been forced to declare bankruptcy to handle the financial judgments against her. GreenTech had successfully recovered their initial investment, plus damages. My own intellectual property lawsuit had resulted in additional financial penalties that would take years for her to repay. The comfortable lifestyle she'd taken for granted had disappeared overnight. But perhaps most importantly, she'd lost the family admiration that had always been her primary source of validation. My parents now saw her clearly not as the successful daughter who deserved their pride, but as someone who had systematically exploited their love and trust to harm her own sister. The last conversation I'd had with Celeste had been 3 months earlier, when Shed made a final attempt at reconciliation. Shed called asking for a meeting, claiming she wanted to work things out as sisters. I'd agreed, curious to see whether Shed finally accepted responsibility for her actions. What I encountered instead was the same manipulative person I'd always known, just with fewer resources and options. Shed spent our coffee meeting alternating between fake apologies and subtle accusations, suggesting that my legal victory had been somehow unfair or excessive.